Good morning. Welcome to the Extra on KRDO News Radio, the show that connects you with the topics and issues that are and issues that are important to you. Very important person here today, one of your favorites, Catherine Hammond Law Group. Catherine, hello. I feel like I haven't seen you in forever. Why do we feel like we haven't seen each other in forever?
I don't know. I think we skipped the month of April.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, you've been traveling like crazy.
I tend to travel.
You
I've been
do.
traveling for work more this year.
Yeah.
Had a little fun trip in there too.
That's good, though. Important travels.
Yeah.
Business travels. Get knowledgeable travels.
That's it. I tend to travel to get myself educated so that I can better help clients.
Absolutely. It's always continuing education, isn't it?
It is.
And today we're talking about what might surprise you about getting your estate plan done. I personally, think, okay, a lot of people don't even want to think about it, do they? Estate planning. It's like, I don't want to work on that.
Right. Because we don't want to think about our own mortality.
Right.
As if not thinking about it will help it not happen.
Right. I do that all the time. If I don't think about it or focus on it, it'll never happen.
Right.
And it's still barreling down the road at you, right?
Exactly. And we never know when.
Right. And so being prepared for yourself, for your family, for your loved ones is the best thing to do. And for those that don't know your background, Catherine, you were kind of thrust into this world at a young age.
I was. I first hired an attorney when I was 22 years old to take care of my mother who had early onset Alzheimer's disease. And I was in the legal system for many years as her conservator and guardian, having to ask the court for permission for every little thing. And so I went to law school so that I can help other people navigate the legal system and maybe even, if you plan well, avoid the legal system in the event of incapacity and at the time of death. So we're passionate about helping the public understand how the system works and what your options are. So we have workshops all the time. Love for people to come to those and just get a little more information.
Because you kind of hit the nail on the head there. Anything you can do to be prepared so you don't end up in the legal system, you're already going through a stressful situation. The last place you want to be with your family is before a judge.
Right.
I mean, that's just adds more pressure and stress.
It really does. And expense.
And
for the most part.
expense, absolutely. And speaking of workshops, you have workshops every month.
We do.
Okay, so how many are coming up this month?
We have 3 workshops coming up next week.
Okay.
On Tuesday, the 14th of May, and Saturday, the 18th of May. If you're interested in coming to those, they're already filling up. So you might want to go online
and get registered
to register
now.
Or call our office, and I can give the number. Well, it's 719-520-1474 or coloradoestateplan.com, but those are filling up.
Okay, so go get registered now.
Yes.
And by the way, if you have a question for Catherine, you can always go to our website, krdo.com, look under the radio tab, and then you will see Ask the Estate Attorney, and those questions go straight to you. Correct?
They do. They come straight to my office, and I have somebody who helps me figure out just to make sure it's an estate planning question.
Right.
We don't do any personal injury work or divorce or bankruptcy.
This is strictly
if you really
estate,
need
yeah.
help and you need to find a good attorney in town, we're happy to refer you. But my expertise really lies only in estate planning and elder law.
Absolutely. So if you do have a question for Catherine, go ahead and head over there. And the one thing about planning, Catherine, is it can be more complicated than you think. I think in some situations, or a lot of situations, a lot of people think, okay, so Jack is going to get the car. Sally is going to get the Christmas tree. Lucy's going to get the vase, right? But that's not...
Right.
That's not how it rolls.
Yes.
Yeah.
And most people come into our office thinking exactly that.
Yeah.
And they sit down with me and say, hi, I need a new will and a power of attorney. Or maybe they even are thinking I need a trust. And they think that attorneys should be an order taker and we just do the documents that they've asked for and plop in the names that they want. But there's a whole lot else that we need to talk about.
And you go into in-depth questions to find out what is exactly right for that individual, that family.
We really do. And often people think they need to have a list of all of their assets when they first go in to chat with their attorney. At least at our office, that's not the way that it works. We need to know a little bit about your assets in general, how much total you have in assets, total value, and the different types of assets that you have. But more than that, we're talking about some other things, primarily what it is that you want,
Right.
and what it is that you don't want. So we sit down when people come into our office and ask them about their goals. And a lot of people will say, well, I want to make it easy for my family. That's great. I know what easy is for me, but what does that mean to you?
Define easy for you.
Exactly.
Right.
So we spend a lot of time digging into that. Some people really don't want their family to have to go through probate. Some people are okay with going through probate. What does easy mean in terms of who is going to wrap things up? Do you have a family member who would be able to do that, or do you have a professional or want a professional to be involved so that your family doesn't have to deal with that at all?
Right. And so focus on those goals. Okay. And actually, Catherine, let's take a quick break now. And when we come back, we're going to talk about more of that conversation when you first start and helping folks. We'll have more with Catherine Hammond, Hammond Law Group, next on The Extra on KRDO News Radio. Welcome back to The Extra on KRDO News Radio. We were talking with Catherine Hammond, Hammond Law Group, and we're talking about surprises, or it might surprise you about getting the estate plan done. And Catherine, we were talking about not as easy as just going in and going, here's what I need you to do. Sally gets the car, whatever, blah, blah. Okay, we're done. That's not estate planning, right?
Right.
And we were talking about how when they first come in and when they come into Hammond Law Group, it's a discussion on, okay, what's your goals? What would you like to accomplish? But then that discussion goes even further, doesn't it?
It does. We need to talk about what you want, but also what you don't want, what you want to avoid. And so that's where we need to dig into your concerns. And this is where some people are a little bit uncomfortable with the thought of coming in to chat with an estate planning attorney. We're able to do it in a way that ends up feeling very comfortable, but some people have maybe a child who hasn't spoken to them for years.
Yeah, right.
Those kinds of things we need to know about. We need to know if you have a child or other beneficiary who maybe has a drug issue.
Right.
And we need to make sure that they don't get the money all in one chunk. Or maybe you just have a daughter-in-law who's a little bit lazy, and you want to make sure that your son gets the money, but it doesn't end up with her if your son inherits the money and then a couple of years later they get divorced.
Right.
People think if I just name my daughter in my estate plan, then my son-in-law won't get it. That's not correct.
The case. Right.
Not at all.
Right.
So if you don't want your child-in-law to get the money, there's a special way that we can set things up to make sure that if they get divorced after your child inherits the money, it won't be split in that divorce and give your future ex-daughter-in-law or son-in-law half of the inheritance.
Well, and another big discussion is your healthcare wishes. This is huge, isn't it?
It's really huge.
Make your own decisions and take the burden off your family, right?
Yes.
Did I say it right?
You said it exactly right. Because when it comes to difficult decisions, the worst thing in the world is for your family to have to make a difficult decision and not know what you would want. It's hard enough for them to make difficult decisions if they know what you want.
Right.
And that means having some comprehensive conversations with them about what makes life meaningful to you.
Right.
Whether it's meaningful conversation, whether it's being able to watch football and, eat your favorite chocolate, all of those things go into what gives you quality of life. Most of us, when we stop to think about it, really aren't interested in quantity of life if there's no quality.
Right.
I have no desire to just be alive on this planet for a long time if I can't really live while I'm here.
Right. So you're in a vegetative state.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I watched my mother do that for about 11 years. And I wouldn't wish that on anybody, and it's certainly not what I would want for myself. In addition to that, there are a lot of micro decisions that go into those situations where we don't have quality of life. And so I recommend that people get educated. There are some great books out there. There's one called Knocking on Heaven's Door by Katie Butler that really goes into great depth about exactly what kinds of decisions can put you in a situation where you're still alive but don't have quality of life. She wrote another book recently. I think it's called Dying Well, that I think goes into even more detail on that. So Katie Butler.
So go check those out.
Absolutely.
Now, go ahead.
And the other thing that I wanted to say about what you want and what you don't want, when you have human beneficiaries, whether they're children or nieces and nephews, whoever your beneficiaries might be, it might be that you want them to get their entire inheritance all in one lump sum. But it might be that it would be better for them not to get it all at once.
At a certain age.
Exactly.
Or, yeah.
And that's what I've done for my daughters. My daughters are both married, mothers of small children. They're responsible. But I still wouldn't want them to get their entire inheritance at once. And so for me personally, I have it set up so that it would go to them in thirds. 1/3 when I pass away, another third 5 years later, and the remaining third 10 years later, so that they can have a little bit of chance to practice with it
and then
get used to it.
And for a long time that they have that security too.
Exactly, because their needs in year 1, year 0, will be very different from their needs 10 years out. And that builds in some cushion for them.
Absolutely. Now, Catherine, you say context determines exact estate plan needs. What do you mean by that?
I mean, knowing about your situation, your family, your assets, the way that you own your assets, all of those things determines what we might need to do from an estate planning perspective. So let's start with the family.
Okay.
The family dynamics determine a lot about what might be the best kind of estate plan for you. And so we take your family dynamics plus what you want to accomplish and what you want to avoid, and we start taking a look at, does your family get along well? How responsible are your family members? Do you have grown-up responsible beneficiaries or kids, or are they still growing up and maturing? Do you have a blended family or not? All of those things determine a lot of nuances about the way that we might plan things. So let's take, for example, a blended family.
Okay. Which so many families are today.
Right. If you bring children from a previous relationship into this one, you have a blended family. There are a lot of different dynamics in a blended family. Most people want to make sure that their new spouse is taken care of if they pass away.
Right.
But they also want to make sure that something goes to their own children.
Right.
And so having an estate plan where everything is owned in joint tenancy, and you have a will that may or may not even name your children, if your assets are owned in joint tenancy with your spouse will get everything when you die, but your children won't receive anything. So then we take a look at how much do you want your children to receive, and how do you want to take care of your new spouse? Maybe when we want to make provisions so that your new spouse can stay in the house for a certain period of time. Maybe we want them to get the house, or maybe we just want them to be able to live there for a period of time. It may depend on how long you've been with new spouse, whether you acquired the assets together. There are so many dynamics in that we need to uncover. So we start our meetings with prospective clients by really just asking a lot of questions to get to the foundational things that are important to you, so that we can create a custom plan to make things happen the way that works for you.
Yeah, the way that works for you. Okay, and we do need to take a break, and when we come back, we'll have more with Catherine Hammond, Hammond Law Group, next on The Extra on KRDO News Radio. Welcome back to The Extra on KRDO News Radio. Today we're talking with Catherine Hammond from Hammond Law Group. And by the way, if you have a question for Catherine, you can go to our website, krdo.com, click under the radio tab, and you'll see Ask the Estate Attorney. And that question will go to Catherine and her team. And we were talking about working on your estate plan and the context of your estate plan. We talked about family, but also your assets can obviously determine your estate plan.
Exactly. It determines a lot of things about your estate plan. And so, for example, if you own a home, there might be certain considerations. If you own a home, then we know for sure that when you pass away, or if you own it jointly with somebody else, with a spouse or somebody else, once both of you have passed away, that it's going to have to go through probate. some people are okay with going through probate. Some people would not like to go through probate.
Right.
And so whether you own a home or not will help us understand, first of all, what kind of estate plan might be right for you when we combine that with exactly what you want. And then also helpful to know if you own real estate that's out of state, because every single piece of real estate has to go through probate in the state where it's physically located. So if you have a Colorado home, but then you have a vacation property in California, or a timeshare, or a mineral interest in Oklahoma or South Dakota, something like that, those things are going to have to go through probate. In addition to your Colorado probate, you'll have to go through probate in the state where those other things are located. Anything that's deeded. So mineral interests, vacant lots, timeshares, all of those things. So that might play into our decision about what kind of estate plan is best for you. And then whether or not you own a business.
Oh, yeah.
A business can complicate things
Absolutely.
substantially. And so probate is one of those things where if it gets more complicated, it gets substantially more expensive. And so if you have a business, we need to make sure that, number one, things are set up to be as financially efficient as possible, but also so that the business can continue running if you become disabled or when you pass away. So that's,
and your plans for it is going to be sold, is going to be passed on to a family, that kind of stuff.
exactly.
Right? Yeah.
And what's the transition period going to look like? Because if there's a period where nobody is in control of your business, nobody can make things happen, that might put a substantial damper on your business. So really important to take that into consideration in figuring out what kind of estate plan works best for you.
But it also, and what we're talking about, Catherine, I mean, I think it's kind of helpful and clear that this is why DIY estate plans can and actually set you back and your family back, and not have laid out what you want and your desires for your family.
Right. There are so many things that can go wrong with DIY estate plans, do it yourself. So, on an asset level, the other thing that's helpful for people to know is how much money you have in retirement plans compared to the rest of your estate may also play a role in exactly the way that we want to set things up.
Right.
You can name beneficiaries on your retirement plans, and that money goes directly to your beneficiaries. That may or may not be exactly what we want to have happen. If you don't want your beneficiaries to have access to all of the inheritance, that might not be quite right. Or if you want them to have divorce protection. So all of these things are part of the picture that you need to tell your estate planning attorney so that they can help you figure out the right type of plan, a will-based plan versus a revocable living trust-based plan, and all of the nuances about exactly the way the plan is going to be set up.
Right. Right. And so that's why it's good to set up an appointment and, start discussing.
Absolutely. So the way that you own your assets is another really important factor there.
Okay.
Your assets that are owned in joint tenancy are going to go a little bit differently when you pass away. Of course, it goes to the surviving joint tenant. And so there's going to be a probate. If you own a house with your spouse in joint tenancy, there's going to be a probate when the second one of you passes away. And there are limited tax planning options when you own assets in joint tenancy. For most people these days, that's not a problem if you don't have the tax planning options that other forms of ownership would allow. But for some people, we might want to be able to double the amount of money that you're passing tax-free. Joint tenancy just doesn't allow you to do that. So other people might own their property. And when I talk to people about how they own their home, most people don't have any idea. They think they own it with their spouse and maybe in joint tenancy.
And they don't know who's on the...
Right. And it may be joint tenancy or it might be tenants in common. If you own it as tenants in common, if it doesn't specify that it's in joint tenancy, then when the first spouse dies, you're going to have to go through probate. And that's just a big old pain in the neck.
Wow.
So,
and you have to be aware of that and you have to know.
absolutely.
Or else it could be a big surprise for you.
Right.
Big surprise.
So all of the property ownership factors go into exactly what's the right kind of estate plan for you.
Absolutely. Perfect. Okay. And I did want to touch back on the DIY and doing it yourself. Do you get a lot of people that come in, Catherine, and maybe sadly after the situation and they had a DIY and that kind of tangles them up a little bit? Have you seen that?
We have seen that multiple times. And one of the times that was saddest to me was a situation where the wife had a diagnosis of Lou Gehrig's disease. And so they knew that she was going to be becoming incapacitated. And so they printed out a power of attorney off of the internet and signed it. And they thought that they were going to be good for once wife became incapacitated. But several years later, they went to use the power of attorney, and the bank said, this power of attorney will not work, because they had printed out the wrong form. So the form that they printed out said, this power of attorney is good until she becomes incapacitated.
Once she becomes incapacitated.
Right. So now it's no good. The other situation that we see regularly, there are so many things within the estate planning documents that lay people just don't have the knowledge.
You just think it's, hey, it's a form, it's perfect.
Exactly.
Let's print it. Right.
And a perfect example is blended families who write wills. And if you have, let's say, a blended family where both spouses come in with children and both spouses want their kids to get something when they die, but they own everything in joint tenancy, and they have wills that say, I want something to go to my kids and something to go to my spouse, but everything's owned in joint tenancy, when they die, they disinherit their own children.
Isn't that amazing?
Completely accidentally.
Isn't that amazing? And nobody would ever
It's
think
tragic.
of that, doing that. Right.
But it happens all the time.
And is there a way to go back and undo that or not?
Absolutely not.
Oh my gosh.
No way to fix it.
That's harsh. Okay, Catherine, let's take a break. That's like, boom, mic drop, right? Can't fix it. That's scary. Okay, we'll have more with Catherine Hammond. Hammond Law Group next on The Extra on KRDO News Radio. Welcome back to The Extra on KRDO News Radio, talking with Catherine Hammond, Hammond Law Group. Okay, so we kind of got to get the hard part out of the way, Catherine. We talked about the surprises you might run into about estate planning, but guess what? We talked about it. It's done.
Right.
You faced it.
That's as hard as it gets.
That's as hard as it gets. So let's talk about really what estate planning can do for you.
Yeah.
We got the hard part out of the way.
Estate planning, when it comes down to it, is all about getting rid of that nagging voice in the back of your head saying, you really ought to get this done. You know you ought to get this done. All of us have that nagging voice. And we think we probably have more time, but we all know that we don't really know. So It's about getting it out of the way so that you can go on about your business and live your life without that thing hanging over your shoulder and just have peace of mind.
Absolutely. And once you start having that conversation and you start getting everything figured out, then it comes together.
Right.
And then you have that peace of mind.
Absolutely.
And then your family is taken care of.
And estate planning attorneys have a lot of experience in talking about all of these difficult things. And we have a number of estate planning attorneys in town. I don't think any of them will frighten you as you have this conversation.
Right. Because it is it's a big thing, but again, it's not going to go away. So running from it is not going to help, right? It's not going to go
There is
away.
no running from it.
Right.
There's leaving it for your family to deal with because you didn't want to deal with it, or there's taking care of it and getting the peace of mind.
Now, let's talk about the workshops. You said they're filling up very quickly for this month. There's 3 this month.
Yes.
Okay, so
next week.
They're all next week?
Next Tuesday, the 14th of May at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and 6:30 in the evening.
Okay.
Or Saturday, the 18th at 10 o'clock in the morning. You can register online at coloradoestateplan.com or call our office at 719-520-1474.
And get registered because they're filling up.
Get registered today. They are filling up.
And this is just a basic conversation about here's the starting point. And then, of course, they can speak with you further or part of your team.
People who want to come in and chat with an attorney afterwards are welcome to, but the workshop is a no-pressure educational environment.
Perfect. And again, if you have a question for Catherine or her team, go to krdo.com, look under the radio tab, and click on Ask the Estate Attorney. And before we wrap up today, Catherine, I know you do have a special podcast series as well I want to talk about really quick.
Yes.
And this is called A Thriving life.
Yes.
Now, this has been a big project, right, for you, something that you've been passionate about for quite some time.
A Thriving Life is a community that we have developed for caregivers. So it's mostly focused on people who have a loved one with dementia, but it goes well beyond that to people who are caring for anybody, supporting anybody through a difficult season in life. And so we have the podcast, and then we also have an online community where we have Q&As and coaching sessions and all kinds of things to help people. Most caregivers go from problem to problem to problem, and it's all about just solving the next problem. We help you rise above all of that and give you skills and tools and perspectives that will help with everything that comes up. So you can
And a
find
support
us,
system, it sounds like, too.
yes,
Which is a huge
that's
thing.
the most important
Right,
thing. So
right.
athrivinglife.org is where you can find us there, and our podcast is also on KRDO.
Perfect. And how many times does the podcast come out? Is it once a month?
It comes out twice a month.
Twice a month. That's fantastic. And so great tips for caregivers and
Yes.
all that stuff.
And my co-host is Kent Matthews, who many people in town know. He's with the Area Agency on Aging. We also founded the online community together. So it's a wonderful support from some different perspectives.
Right.
And really all about the community and helping you get through the difficult season without having to feel alone.
Right. Yeah, because sometimes that can happen. A caregiver can feel very isolated, can't they?
Very isolated.
And they don't have a support
and they feel
system.
like they're drowning.
Right. Right. Well, and it's so great that you've created that community here in Colorado Springs, because we do have an aging community. A lot of
Right.
areas do, but we have a lot of retayees here as well.
We have a ton of retirees.
Right.
And we get connected with people who are all over the country.
Right.
So because it's online, it enables us to do that, to serve people here as well as everywhere in the world.
So again, it's a thrivinglife.org.
Yes.
And then that connects you with, like, I'm assuming there's like a social media group and all that stuff
There
that you can connect
is.
with. And then listen to the podcast and all that stuff.
Yeah.
You are
Come
awesome.
join us.
Absolutely.
We love taking care of caregivers.
Absolutely. Catherine, you are awesome. And again, you can go ask Catherine a question, krdo.com, look under the radio tab and click on Ask the Estate Attorney. Thank you so much, Catherine.
Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. We'll talk with you soon. And coming up tomorrow on The Extra, they were just awarded one of the top zoos in the country. We will talk with Cheyenne Mountain Zoo tomorrow on The Extra on KRDO News Radio.